I am Adam Lundy, co-host of They Live by Film, a podcast dedicated to bringing you film discussion and interviews from around the world. Every week, my co-hosts Chris Haskell, Zach Bryant and I discuss a wide range of films, from monumental classics like Vertigo and The Rules of the Game, to the craziest, schlockiest movies ever made like Deathbed and everything in between. We are also lucky enough to have sat down with some of the biggest players in the boutique Blu-ray and film restoration game. If this is your thing, then come hang out with us every Thursday at 7 p.m. Eastern, wherever you normally stream your podcasts, and now as part of the Someone's Favorite Productions podcast network.
Hello there, and welcome back to The Disconnected. I'm here with only the third Ryan that I've allowed to be on the channel. It's me, myself, Ryan Greyface from TerraVision, and now Ryan from the New World Pictures podcast. Thank you for being the third Ryan.
Well, thank you for having me. I'll take the bronze. I'm happy to take it.
It's not an easy fight. There's a lot of Ryans out there.
So many, and I think when your parents named you and they named me, they were thinking, not a lot of Ryans. And it turned out there was like a zeitgeist thing that everybody was deciding that was a cool, new, unique name.
So I'm going to use your episode here to increase the Disconnected lore. I chose the name Ryan and legally changed my name in 2012.
Really?
That was my middle name for years.
Okay.
I was actually born Chad, and I hate that goddamn name.
Wow.
And when I was in, I think it was 4th grade, there was 3 Chads in my class, and I hated being Chad V all the time. And I was like, you know what? There's not a single Ryan in this school. I'm Ryan now. And so from 4th grade, I was Ryan forever. But then of course I turned like 20, and every goddamn person in the world is named Ryan all of a sudden.
You gotta go back in. What other name can you?
I'm just going by my last name now. I'm gonna be like Prince, right. Single name only.
That's my name. That's it. Make your signature a lot easier.
All right, so now that we've got the fun thing out of the way, New World Pictures podcast. I'm going to start this off by saying, if you are not subscribed, you're fucking up right now. This is like one of the most entertaining podcasts that you can go into out there. We're going to have you to define a lot of things. We're going to talk about New World. We're going to talk about your love for some of these. But the biggest thing is that many of these are genuinely great movies. Many of these are genuinely awful movies. But the funnest thing is hearing 3 people with incredible chemistry covering most of these movies, interspersed with interviews and clips and impressions and everything under the sun. It is a wonderful show. Oh, bad accents for sure. Basically in every episode.
Yeah. Yeah. This our most recent episode has us all doing English accents because we talk about Hellraiser 2, and mine is easily the worst. And I actually think I can do a decent one, but I don't do it on the podcast. So
I was not going to insult, but yeah, yours is by far the worst.
It is 100%. There's no denying it. It's terrible.
So New World Pictures is it was a production company, and you can see the logo here. You've probably seen it in many different places. Can you tell us there you go. What is New World Pictures? What is the company?
New World Pictures was started by Roger Corman in 1970. He was tired of working with AIP and making all those Poe movies, and said, you know what? Basically, he was like, you know what? When they distribute the movie, they make all this money. I kind of want that money. So he decided to go into distribution by himself. He was still finishing out his directorial career. He was still working on Von Richthofen and Brown when they were working on their first couple movies, which were a biker movie, Angels Die Hard, and Stephanie Rothman's Student Nurses. Those were the first movies in 1970. And he sold the company in the early 80s to a bunch of lawyers. And that became the VHS era that maybe more people are familiar with, where you got like your Children of the Corns and your Angel and your Hellraisers. And then at the end of the 80s, basically by the time they put out Heathers, they are there was a stock, Black Monday, I believe, that happened in 1987. So the stock market just crashed. Yep. They had gone public, so they were in a lot of trouble. And by 89, they basically sold the company off. But in the meantime, they had owned Marvel, So they owned a lot of those characters, not Spider-Man and Captain America, because those were owned by Canon.
Of course.
But they did not realize they didn't get those. But they had TV stuff going. So, and then into the 90s, it basically becomes all TV. And they basically do TV movies and TV shows up until they are bought out by Fox and Rupert Murdoch. And it becomes, because they were a series of TV stations, and he bought them all up because he wanted the TV stations, and New World Pictures was no more. So basically our podcast covers from 1970 to the mid 90s. So there's a lot of stuff, and we find more and more stuff all the time.
So yeah, New World has a lot going for it, and if you have never like given even a quick Google to see what is under the New World Pictures line, there are tons of titles that you will recognize from boutique physical media releases, from watching on TV in 1991, from things that you have been making fun of silently for 34 years. It is there's a lot out there. So
yes.
What is the first thing that got you into New World?
I think we were in a New World already. In fact, my brother, who's my co-host, and he built a site when we were going to do just a bunch of like just a website dedicated to New World Pictures in the 90s. So this is way back when. This is like, this is in the early days of the internet. So
right.
So yeah, we were working on reviews and doing that stuff, and we were real into it. My college roommate, who's been on the show a bunch as well, was also obsessed with New World, and so we would go around to different record stores, video stores, and we would find any VHS with the New World logo, and we bought tons of just junky movies and would watch New World. So it was sort of an obsession that started in college, really, and has just kind of lasted. And when we were talking about doing a podcast back in like 2019. We were like, well, let's just do New World, because that would sort of narrow the focus. But as soon as we started, I started realizing like, but people I think should have context, because the one thing you can say about even the most popular titles, even like Death Race 2000 or something like that, you kind of want to know what the hell happened.
Yep.
So I started, that's when I started getting tons of books. I got tons of books on Corman and New World, and I mean, I just started researching, and I'm getting better and better at doing that, and I'm just trying to so we're trying to entertain, we're also trying to inform, so as much, because if you're going to watch a movie like Hellgate, which is a recent movie we talked about, and was like a New World video movie, we try to find everything we can about it, because if you watch that movie, you're going, what the hell did I just watch? I need to know. It's why I love physical media. It's exactly for those reasons. When you watch something on a boutique label and you're like, what did I just watch? You're like, let's go to the special features, because I need some context here. So that's what we try to like fill it in. So we're talking about New World stuff, and we're sort of like filling in all the different New World information that we have, and sort of like telling you like where it like fit in their release schedule, just so you get like an idea of the company. And then we're trying to give you as much information as we can about the movie that we can discover, so that you have some information about that. And we try to like, have a good time while we chat about the movie. So, because as you said, some of them are great, and some of them, as I used to say, some of these movies are great, and but all of these are New World. So you just gotta love them all.
Speaking of Hellgate, is that the one that just came out fairly recently as a unobstructed view release?
Yes.
I think.
Yeah.
Okay.
Great call. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I didn't know about that Blu-ray until we were up and recording. I have I don't think I have it near me, but I have a DVD, an old DVD of it, which also had The Pit on it, which also was released by New World Pictures, and a Canadian acquisition they bought at the time when Corman had sold the company. So they were just buying movies and just putting stuff out. One of my favorite eras of New World, because it is such a crapshoot. It's just a wild group of movies that they just bought from around the world and put out. So it makes the lineup even more eclectic. But yes, that's
so. For some context for everybody that's watching, what are some of the bigger New World titles that somebody go, holy shit, that was a New World title?
Good question. Well, like I said, I think Death Race is always a good one to point out the 1970s. The Nurses movies, though they did 5 Nurses movies, starting with Student Nurses. night call nurses. We just did Candy Stripe Nurses, which was the 5th and final one. And we've interviewed Alan Holzman, who edited that movie. It was produced by Julie Corman, Roger's wife. And he edited that movie, and boy, what a song that movie has. It will penetrate your brain, and it will never leave it. Trying to think, I got all this stuff behind me. Oh, Galaxy of Terror, any of the sci-fi stuff that they did. Forbidden World, another Alan Holzman directed that one. Battle Beyond the Stars, of course, another Corman era one where he's completely ripping off Star Wars, but got John Sayles writing the script. It's a Seven Samurai or Magnificent Seven ripoff, essentially. Right. And so that's a good one. There you also get into, like I said, in the 90s, you get some of their superhero stuff. So they did the first movie with the Punisher, which is Dolph Lundgren. You get tons of we haven't barely dipped into this, but tons of foreign movies.
Yep.
So we did Cries and Whispers this year in June, what we called June Gloom that month. And we watched all the sad movies because there's a ton of foreign movies that they put out. So,
right.
And recent boutique releases too, because I just got Derzu Uzala, which is a Kurosawa film that they put out. And they did The Story of Adele H, which just came out from Kino. They did Amarcord. They did it was the first time I think that what am I thinking of? Cries and Whispers. Ingmar Bergman. It was the first time that he was ever played at a drive-in. Was because of being released by New World Pictures. So,
that was not the qualifier I was expecting.
Yeah. I mean, one of the singular directors in cinema history, and he was, Corman was buying up his movies. Nobody would buy it. He had a string of misses.
Yeah.
So by the time he picked up Cries and Whispers, that had been released. They were basically offering it to people. And what's funny in the story we tell in the episode is that he had a lawyer, Corman, at the time, one of the lawyers he had for the company, and she was looking into those kinds of acquisitions, and she basically sold the rights. The amount of money that she needed was $75,000, and she sold the rights to non-theatrical entities. So this is people that are going to release movies on planes and in hospitals and things like that, these really weird places. Prisons maybe, and they would sell the distribution rights, and they got the $75,000 from this company that released things non-theatrically, non-television, and she got that money. And because she had that money, she was like, Roger, I got the money, you can buy the rights to Cries and Whispers. And he said, do that again, let's keep doing it. And that's where they started. This is 1972, so this is what starts them on buying all these different foreign movies. So they put out Truffaut, they put out Bergman, they put out Kurosawa, they put out all these movies, and that nobody else was putting out, and yet it's New World Pictures, which you think of more for exploitation movies, biker movies and nurse movies and all this stuff.
Eager for the art house year of the podcast, where we can hear all of those wonderful accents.
We have to. Yeah. I think we did do a little bit of Bergman, because he narrates the trailer for it. And so we maybe did a little bit of Bergman in that episode. I'm trying to remember, but yeah.
Obviously, with the Corman connection, a lot of those titles are also out through Shout Factory. A lot of them have come out as the site exclusives, and then, of course, the ones that they think they'll make a ton of money on, like Battle Beyond the Stars. They've released that widely, but many of those.
I'm sure a 4K is coming. I'm sure, which I'm gonna now have to buy.
And it'll be $43 for some reason.
They're killing me. Oh, also because they did that with Slumber Party Massacre. They put out the 4K of that, so that was also New World, a movie as well. So not New World, the second one. The second one was Corman's next company, but he started doing all the sequels to his big hits at New World when he went to Concord, like Big Bad Mama 2. That was all stuff he did once he had sold New World.
Obviously, we kind of got to touch on what was just a massive episode for Christmas. We got Hellraiser 2, and what a fun episode that was. This is one everybody needs to go listen to, just because it's such an interesting dive into that film, and the fun chemistry behind it, of course, is always interesting.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, well, we had interviewed the director Tony Randall and the
Yeah.
writer Peter Atkins like a probably over a year ago, probably like January of 2022. And so we'd already spoken to them, so we were kind of putting that one off just a little bit. Plus, we had gone on another podcast and talked about it, so we kind of wanted to give some distance, you know.
Right.
But yeah, that allowed me a little bit of time. I don't have it near me, but I found the original press release, and so I use that for it. I try to find those press releases and use them
Yep.
when I can. And so we tried to, you know, and watched all the special features. You know, Arrow has some great discs for that. So we just tried to dive into it. But it's like my brother, my co-host Mark, he loves that movie. Like it's like his favorite movie. He saw it in the movie theater. Like he was amped for it. Like he was. So yeah, that was a fun movie. And what was fun about it too is that my wife Erica, who's also a co-host, she is not a big fan of the Hellraiser movies and doesn't like because they're so gory. They're so effectively and wonderfully gory. But and I get it. It's not the easiest movie to watch, but because of that fact. But you know, so it was fun because I got somebody who loves it and somebody who's like, this movie is gross.
Well, and that's, to me, that's the thing why this podcast is so interesting and genuinely important, because it is not all just all hail New World. It is,
Mhm.
yes, some of these are bad, and we're going to tell you that they're bad and cheesy, but we're also going to have fun doing it. And the chemistry of the three people, when it's mixed and one person really loves the movie and the other two hate it, and there's a little bit of pile up, like, what are you talking about? This is garbage. That's always fun.
Sure.
But it's entertaining education for some stuff that there's honestly not a lot out on some of these titles. Because they were produced so quickly, it just flew under every single radar. And so when somebody like you who's passionate about it can go grab as much as possible and just condense it into one episode, it's like, oh, I can learn everything about Slumber Party Massacre, even though it's been, you know, talked about to death by so many people.
Sure.
Get the actual information from this episode, and it's just always fun.
Well, thank you. Yeah, you know, that's what we are certainly shooting for. First and foremost, we're trying to entertain. Then secondarily, we want to inform you. But
Exactly.
yeah, there's also so much stuff that they put out. Once they put out New World Video,
Yeah.
now you have so much stuff, and I find new titles that I didn't know about all the time, because the best way to kind of look all that stuff up a little bit is IMDb, and that is, you know, not the most reliable narrator in general. Like, the information on there is not extremely accurate. So I keep finding stuff all the time. A lot of stuff I have like an alert from eBay, and I'll find these titles and I'll just send them to my co-hosts and just say, like, here's a new one, and they'll be like, oh no. This is like a lot of stuff too that they released on TV or they released internationally. They released certain titles in Canada through this company called Malofilm, which they combined with. Plus, they combined with a company, I think, that Pierre David started, called Mutual, and they release things New World Mutual. So we've discovered like that there's stuff they released only in Canada through New World Mutual, but not in the US. Weird. Tons of titles. So you have all this stuff that's sort of this big influx, but the video stuff, there's some stuff they just pick up that are, you know, we talked about a couple of them in October, and I wanted to talk about some of the most obscure stuff we possibly could. And so we talked about this wrestling movie they put out called I Like to Hurt People, which was the same guy who made who co-directed Hell Comes to Frogtown.
Oh, damn.
Which is a movie that people have heard of. But he started with this, you know, late 70s shot in Detroit movie about wrestling, which at one point was going to be an actual narrative horror film that featured wrestlers, and there was going to be demonic possession, but they ended up cutting that. So there's only one scene where it kind of is, you can tell them they're sort of talking about weird vibes in the stadium. And it has a bunch of wrestlers, has Andre the Giant, has a bunch of other stuff in it. And then they started just shooting lots of wrestling fights and just having that footage. And they go to New World. They give them some money to have this whole Stop the Sheik movement, because it has the original Sheik, if anybody's familiar with wrestling. And we had a guest on who is like super into wrestling. He used to write a wrestling column. So we were like, tell us all about the world of wrestling, because we just got to know about all that. So there's just such weird. And then this other one called Terror in the Swamp, which was like a locally produced Louisiana movie about a swamp creature
Nice.
made out of nutria, which I didn't know what nutria was, but it's just like a little like a little creature, like a badger kind of thing. It's like a little swamp rat, essentially, is what they call it. And I didn't know what it was, but they turned a nutria into a man. This is probably, if you're from Louisiana, you're like, I can see why you'd make that into a movie. If you're from anywhere else, you're like, what the hell is that? What does that even mean? And it was
Right.
called the Nutria Man, but New World, of course, releases and says Terror in the Swamp, because nobody knows what Nutria is.
Right.
So, but yeah, that kind of stuff. We're trying to give you context on those kinds of releases, which is like, what the heck is this stuff? You know?
I'm eager for like a big glut of Louisiana focused movies coming out. I know TerraVision announced Gator Bait, and I believe somebody, it might be Shout Factory's working on the Hatchet series, and obviously those are much newer, but I would love to see a bunch of those come out, because many of those have just been forgotten over the years.
For sure. Well, the guy who directed Terror in the Swamp is a guy who actually worked on, I'm trying to remember the guy's name, who worked on the guy who directed Legend of Boggy Creek and 1 and 2. So he worked for him and worked on a bunch of his movies, including like The Town That Dreaded Sundown and all that stuff, that he'd worked on all those movies and worked with him. And then he sort of branched off and started trying to make movies in New Orleans. And Terror in the Swamp is one, and he did one other one, which is about some cops. I think it's called... it's, I can't remember the name, but it's all about like, you know, Louisiana cops, basically.
Right.
And it's an action movie made on like $0. I mean,
Nice.
These movies have no budget whatsoever. So, so very interesting stuff to pick up on that. I would be also interested to see more Louisiana set stuff.
It's also super interesting with New World to dive into like the Kevin Bacon separation game, because there's so many just random webs of this movie was made on this set with this person, and because of the relationship with Corman, they also made this movie, and it just explodes from there. And you start thinking, well, some of these franchises are attached to New World, and then you start looking at, well, that creates this giant network. And with New World, I mean, it leads to other films down the line. So stuff from the 70s, because of those relationships, they got stuff coming out in like the early 90s that are just loosely connected because they were friends from the 70s and 80s. And I love stories like this, because it brings the shared resources, it brings like easier budgets, and we just get more like funny and fun films out of it because of that.
Yeah, it's amazing, like the amount of course, you know, people talk about the Corman graduates as people that kind of came through his studio and through, you know, making movies with him, because he would just give people opportunities. But I don't think that particularly even ended in like in the 80s when the new owners came in. Like lots of people got, you know, opportunities. I mean, look at Steve Miner probably being like the biggest director that they have come through in the 80s. And that was after Friday the 13th. And he'd worked on a couple of those movies and directed the second and third. And then he comes through and does House is the first one he does for New World. And he does Soul Man, which is a huge hit at the time.
Of course.
Hit, you know, not a movie we've talked about yet. We're sort of dreading that day, but we will. We'll get to it. And you know, he also directed them for TV, because they had the Wonder Years was a New World show, so he directed the pilot and 7 or 8 episodes of that show. So he did a bunch of stuff, and I think one other movie as well. I think he did Under the Boardwalk. I could be wrong on that. Jeez. We probably already discussed it. Doesn't matter. But he did several movies. So there's lots of like. So to your point, there's lots of other like people that have done, you know, various movies and would go on to do different stuff. We talked about, just as a nearly New World, that's sort of a series that we do where we talk about movies that are like, where lots of them are movies that New World legitimately almost made. Like, for instance, I picked up the 4K of Mean Streets. That was a movie that Corman almost made because Martin Scorsese had made Boxcar Bertha for Corman and for, I think, Fox. I think they released it, or AIP. But he produced it, and so he went with him with the script. And Corman was like, "Yeah, I'll make this, but what if we make this a blaxploitation film instead of setting it in New York?" And Scorsese was like, "No, I'm not going to do that." Corman almost made Alien. We talked about Alien earlier this year, because the original script that Dan O'Bannon wrote, they were walking around trying to get money and see if O'Bannon could direct it. And Corman was like, sounds good, but I'm only gonna put in so much money, which is of course
Right.
always the Corman way. So you're gonna have to get money from somewhere else. So that led them to keep shopping it around, and eventually they sold it to Fox, and the rest is history. But so there's a lot of stuff that they get, and there's certain stuff that like people will leave, and we cover their movies like Night of the Creeps, which we did because Fred Decker came up with the original story of House. He knew Steve Miner. They were almost going to make a Godzilla movie together, and they wrote the script and everything. You can read about it. We talk about it on one of the episodes. I think probably House. And but yeah, they were going to make a big Godzilla movie that didn't work out. And then he ends up going taking Night of the Creeps somewhere else, not New World. But we talked about it because it's like the web of New World is just so widespread, and it's kind of wild. I think I watched a Richard Grieco movie from the late 90s the other night called Against the Law, which I'm like, well,
Okay.
Richard Grieco couldn't have anything to do with New World. He didn't, but it was directed by Jim Wynorski, who got his start actually doing advertising for New World and in the Corman era. And then he wrote the story for Forbidden World. And then eventually when Corman sells the company, he goes over with him and he directs Shopping Mall, et cetera, and starts his massive directing career. So it's like, the web is just, it's everywhere. It's like anywhere I look, even just putting some random movie on, I'm like, oh, well, okay, there's a New World connection. Of course there is. Because it's just everywhere.
Always.
It's crazy.
And then that Jim Wynorski web, that just explodes from there too.
Oh my God. His career, I was like, well, he does Big Bad Mama 2 that I mentioned earlier. He did, Not of This Earth. He does like all these, his filmography is just immense, just huge. David DeCoteau, who has made a million movies. He started as a PA, I think, on probably on Galaxy of Terror, I think. And so, I think he gave them the name of the ship, and that was like the working title before they came up with Galaxy of Terror. They came up with lots of terrible titles because they would take them to Burbank high schools and test them out and be like, what movie would you want to see? Like they did that for this movie called Sorceress, which was directed by Jack Hill, but he took his name off of it. And there's no sorceress in the movie. It's not there. It's about a couple twin barbarian women. And it's called Sorceress because that's what the kids at the high school thought would be a better title. So
Burbank.
It's amazing stuff.
One thing you mentioned that I kind of really want to encourage people, because we've not talked about this on the channel very much at all, but it's not really lost media, but the never made media side of things is expansive. So there are ways on the internet that you can track down unproduced scripts. You can track down scripts that were produced and literally never released. You can find things that have been even like tested in front of audiences and they just said, let's scrap the entire thing. You can track down a big one like La La Land Records just released the original Hook soundtrack that Horner did when it was supposed to be a musical.
Wow.
And so there's fully made songs that were supposed to advance the plot that never came out until in the last year. Like, that's amazing.
Yeah. No, I wish we could do something like I found this, which is like a poster for a movie called Vengeance Land, which was going to be directed by Tony Randall, who directed Hellbound, Hellraiser 2. On the back, this is an ad that was in Variety. And this is like got Flowers in the Attic. It's got Uphill All the Way, Stand Alone. Got a bunch of New World stuff on it. Vengeance Land. So I emailed Tony Randall and I was like, look what I found. And he was like, yeah, I remember. We actually even went out to Utah and like found locations and stuff.
Wow.
But they didn't end up making the movie. But it's... Ashok Amatraj is like the producer. He also produced a lot of stuff with Corman. He produced School Spirit, which we talked about, which was made for New World but not released by New World, and that's why they got the whole Corman lawsuit that ended up with Corman walking away with his library of movies from New World. That's how that ended up happening, because they wouldn't release a couple of his movies because he was making movies directly for New World, even though he'd sold the company, much like Slumber Party Massacre. But yes, there is like so much stuff of movies that they never made. If I'm writing a book on New World, because of course I started realizing that there's not a lot of, because I have all these books on New World, but it's all the Corman era, and there's nothing on the second ownership group. And so I was like, oh man, somebody should write a book on that. And the more I thought about it, I was like, who else but us would even do this?
Right.
You know, like it'd have to be us. There's no one else. We get emails from people all the time that are like, "Hey, do you know the people that made, you know, your New World Pictures? Do you know the people that made such and such a movie? I want to get in touch with them." And I'm like, we're not the actual studio. The studio's gone. But they think we can get a message to people and stuff, you know? So it's, you know, it's like we're sort of we ended up being the torchbearers of the company. And so I'm like, well, I guess who else could write a book about it? So I'm going to start writing. I've been writing a book about
Sweet.
starting from the sale of the company with Roger Corman and sort of being somewhat of a movie guy, but also a history, of, different. So I'll have a chapter on New World Video and so,
Nice.
so different stuff like that. So, and I'm thinking like, I'm bringing it up because if I start writing about all the movies they almost made, I'm like, I don't think I'll ever get it done. It's too much.
Yeah, there's a lot there. It reminds me like the Empire Picture stuff where they would come up with a title or poster and go, okay, go make this movie.
Right. That was something I think he even stole from Corman, because that was something that they would come up with an ad campaign and sell it, because you would sell foreign rights. A lot of that is what he would do, is come up with a poster. And some of those movies, the Empire movies, actually end up with New World because because Empire went down. So some of those movies actually end up being released on New World Video. So we've got some of the Empire movies we already talked about. We talked about Prison, which is the Rennie Harlan directed movie with Viggo Mortensen. That was a big production for Empire. That was supposed to set them on the map, and instead the company went down. He had to sell everything off. He'd overextended himself with Credit Lyonnais. I've read all his books too. I've read all this stuff about Empire. I just got Charles Band's. I got his biography right here. So
nice.
This is what I spend my life doing. Time well spent, everybody. Don't worry. Yeah.
Research.
Research. No, you have to do all that stuff.
It makes it sound more official.
Well, yeah, it's I find books all the time, and I'm like, well, I got to get this. I got to get that. I mean, I'm just trying to grab stuff from all. For their Bergman episode, I grabbed one of his books, which is all about that he wrote, which is all about his movies. So it's called Images. So I picked up his book so I could read portions of that while we talked about the movie, because I'm just trying to get all the context I can for these movies. So
it helps a lot. And
thank you.
The podcast, like in many times, it feels like it could genuinely be a special feature on a disc. And I hope people start to take some of these seriously like that, because it's that type of thing that just doing that work. And now that I'm somebody that's kind of doing some of these features, it takes much. It takes so much.
Keep us in mind, Ryan.
You're on the list, damn it.
Thank you.
It takes so much research to track down things that are like they've literally never been spoken about. And it's crazy for people to think about that in the world of the internet, because literally everyone has an opinion. But when it came out in 1982, we don't just have thousands of people talking about films.
That's right. There's not as much stuff. It's all like in old magazines, which again, I have tons of old magazines, tons of old Fangorias and various sci-fi magazines. I found a big interview for a movie called Android that New World produced, and they ended up putting out, at least in terms of I think they only tested the movie, and eventually the filmmakers bought it back and then released it themselves in their own company. They end up making one more movie, and then they kind of fall apart. I had to buy an old magazine which had an interview with the director, just to be like, look, this is the information. There's no website filled with all this old stuff. It's so hard to find. You have to often track down physical, old copies of magazines and stuff. We've had the guy who did the Canon Film Guide, Austin Trunick. We had him on for an episode when we did an episode on Captain America, a nearly New World, because of course they didn't have the rights. And he does the same thing. So he'll point stuff out to me too. He tracks down all these old Hollywood reporters and varieties, because even you can go and look up some of the digitized versions of that, but it's not as easy as you'd think. So having the physical copies of all that stuff is huge. So yeah, you have to do a lot of digging, and I've gotten better over the years at how to dig stuff up and how to find stuff, because if you're just going to use Google, it's not enough, and there's not enough there. You can't just sit there and look at Wikipedia. like I said, IMDb is an unreliable narrator. You can't just go to them and look at their trivia, because some of that stuff is hard to substantiate. If I ever mention it, I will mention this is IMDb, so take it with a grain of salt.
Right.
You never know. I don't know how this information got out there, but it is tough, because the 80s and certainly the 70s, there's not tons of information on these movies, and so you really have to seek it out. But we will hopefully have an announcement to make in terms of being on some sort of physical media next year, but nothing we can talk about yet. But hopefully it will be just the beginning. So, because certainly we are huge fans of physical media, me and my brother. So that's been like the goal, if we could get to do that, and we'll start to actually do some of our own commentaries. We're going to start doing next year.
Nice.
Yeah.
Very nice.
We've been just trying to work out how exactly we're going to do it, how we'd record it. And we're going to bring on some of the people that either wrote or directed some of these movies too. So we'll be doing that. I'm not sure when exactly this would happen, but I know we've talked about doing one for Grunt, the wrestling movie, which is a movie. And so we've talked about doing that. So there's a couple other big titles that we've talked about. So hopefully we'll get to those next year, because that's something that we've really been wanting to do for a while, is start, because it's as you could sit around and wait, like, man, won't somebody just ask me to do a commentary? You just got to go out and start making them, because, you can't sit around and wait. You got to start making the stuff happen. So as you well know, and as you have done successfully.
I would agree with you. And if anybody is out there trying to get into this, one thing that I will say, which doesn't really get talked about enough because of the incredible resource that it is, archive.org has a lot of the things that the two of us are talking about right now. So when Ryan's saying magazines, for a lot of these films, it's not just like capital M magazines, it's actual zines that came out from somebody's freaking garage in 1983. And many of those are archived on archive.org. And the hard part is, like he's saying, you can't just search for you can't just search Corman and have everything pop up, because they didn't do character recognition on everything. You have to know what issue was it in, what was the name of it, if I can track that down, and then really dive in. But getting that information is very difficult too.
Yeah, the search on archive.org the metadata is not enormous on those things, so it's really hard to find. You can't just like put any title up there and find exactly what you're looking for. You have to be willing to dig, and that takes time. That's what we try to do. We try to put in the work, and then we have a good time, and then we just try to have fun. But we try to put in the work in advance, and then try to have a good time with it. And that's hopefully what separates us from other people, is just wanting to put in that work.
Yeah, that work is a big separator for many people.
It is. Look, sometimes I listen to lots of podcasts. Sometimes I'd love to just come in and just chat about a movie. I guest on podcasts all the time. It's a blast. It's so fun. But like, I do my homework, I want to be prepared. Like, that's just how I'm built, and that's how we do our podcasts. We have to come in ready, so
exactly.
The only one who could maybe afford to not come in totally prepared is my wife, because she's one of the funniest people on the planet. So she can come in and just, have a great time. But even she is, looking stuff up and knowing like where the actors are and all that. I mean, we come in prepared, you got to come in prepared.
I agree. You brought up physical media. It's probably time to get into it. You have a mountain of it behind you, just like me.
Yeah, too much.
Why physical media is the obvious question. And then, other than New World, is there anything you focus on?
I'm starting with the last question first. I have everything, which is I've read like several people be like, look, you can't buy it all. I listen to lots of like physical media podcasts, and they're like, you can't buy it all. And I'm like, you can't? Because I'm sitting here and I'm like, wait, what a novel concept, because I'm trying to get all of it. I guess that's true. I don't need to get everything. I can be selective sometimes, because I'm like, oh, they're putting out this, well, I got to get that.
Right.
So, but physical media is something that I have just always grown up with. My brother and I are with our parents. They would take us to the movies. Like, every Sunday we go see the movie. Like a matinee. So that was probably our church. Basically, was going to see movies every weekend. And then, my mom in not the early days of VHS, because it took us a while to get a VCR, but eventually, once we had one, She would just buy movies. Now, when they were cheaper, for a long time, VHS was expensive. I know she's not going out there buying $90 VHS tapes. But once they became somewhat more affordable and they're like in the $15, $20 range, she started buying movies. So we would have this library. Plus, we didn't have cable, but other people would tape stuff off HBO. So,
nice.
We would have like Nightmare on Elm Street 3 in between Lethal Weapon and I don't probably like some other like
Blue Steel comedy. Or something.
Yeah, right. Blue Steel. I just got that Blu-ray. I watched it the other week. It's
perfect timing.
Really good. Yeah, it's a great movie. Really good.
Yeah.
There's like a lot of Catherine Bigelow stuff suddenly on physical media. It's kind of a little explosion,
and yet no Near Dark. That's been rumored for like 3 years from Studio Canal now.
I know it's like my favorite of her movies, but sorry everybody that loves Point Break. I do love Point Break, but Near Dark is just a masterpiece. So
incredible, and that old Blu-ray is garbage.
Oh man, I used to watch it all the time on VHS. I had the VHS. That would just look like clouded bullshit. It's awful to look at. Yeah. You can't tell what anything is in some scenes. It's terrible.
Yeah, especially.
It started in VHS, and then I got a job, at video stores. So I started working. I worked at Blockbuster for a brief, 3-month period, and then I moved to literally another store that was 2 stores up. This California, maybe you've heard of them, called the Warehouse.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, the as in where is something house.
Yep.
And I worked at the Warehouse, which is also music and also movies. So it was movie rentals. And so I love music. I love movies. So that was perfect because I could order things off their whole catalog, and I could order things in and get a discount. So I was just buying VHS. I was buying, records, all this stuff that I've been collecting forever. I eventually did get rid of a lot of my VHS tapes, which is a mistake because now I'm buying them back, which is not great, not a smart idea. But I got into it from there. And then once DVDs came out, it was like this, I was like, oh my God, you get the director to talk about the movie.
Yep.
Like that blew my mind. And then all of a sudden I was buying every DVD that was out there. Because I was like, oh, I've got to get Blade Runner. I want to hear all about, I got to get all the inside scoop. So I was into all of that stuff. I was into like getting movie magazines. I subscribed to Film Threat back in the day. I was getting I was just, all this stuff, eating all this stuff, loving it. So it sort of started way, way back when. And then even before like lockdown and the pandemic and everything, I was kind of going a little hog wild, certainly for all the stuff for the podcast, but like even beyond that. But then once we were at home 24 hours a day, it was like click on more orders and ordering way more stuff. And it became all of this. So a lot of it is New World stuff. I concentrate a lot on New World stuff, but I'll get all the boutique stuff. I've been a subscriber for Vinegar Syndrome for 2 years. Me and my brother both subscribe, and then we like discuss the movies, just for fun. But it's a lot to keep up with. Now all the partner labels, I get tons of the partner label stuff. I've got tons of Deaf Crocodile stuff here. I got all the Fun City stuff. Like
nice.
I now just order direct from Fun City. I'll get anything that they put out. They've got my buy-in because I haven't loved everything, but like they put out great stuff. So I kind of, look at everything. Severin, all the companies, all of them, all the sales. I'm all over all of it. I'm ordering for Hamilton book way too much, trying to fill in any gaps.
I love Hamilton.
It's So now it's my wife has said to me, like, we don't need to own all of it. We don't really need to own all of it. But and she calls our bedroom Ryebuster. So because and so when we're gonna watch a movie and pick a movie, she goes, let's watch a staff pick tonight. So she goes through and picks something out, and it's a staff pick because it's like a mini video store. And my kids are like, why? Because it's all to them. It's all streaming. They don't quite get that it's there. In fact, just last night we watched. I got the steelbook of Meg 2, The Trench. While we were at
highbrow cinema, got it.
I mean, yes, yeah. So anyone who is questioning my taste, let that be a lesson to you. We watched it for a second time because we actually went and saw it in the theater in 4DX as a family. So I'm raising them right, everybody. And it was a late showing because it was out of 4DX. We had to go to like a 10 o'clock showing. We're like, kids, get ready. Get ready. We're gonna have our brains rattled by this movie. But we watched it last night, and it's on streaming now. It's on Netflix. But I was like, I got the 4K here. We gotta watch it in that. So my daughter comes back from a. It was me and my son. So our daughter comes back from a party, and she's like, oh, "Are you watching this on Netflix?" And he turns and says, "No, we're watching this on 4X or 4K. Excuse me, 4K, baby." So he's like, "I'm like, that's right, son." So yes, yeah. So great. You know, it's a ride. It's a ride to have all these movies. You know.
I love that. I do the exact same thing. I try to get them to browse this like a video store, but then half my stuff is too adult because mine are still too young.
Mm-hmm.
I'm eager for mine to be your kids' ages soon, but time will tell.
Yeah, they have their own little. I just got a little storage cabinet just to have like their movies because I'm not mixing it in with ours yet. We're not quite there yet. You know, there's a Marvel row, so they can go to that. But I don't know if your kids are like this, but I know mine are, which was not the case for me growing up. But like it's a cabinet, and I'm nervous about because it has doors, and like if you put stuff behind things, kids are just like, it's gone.
Yep.
It's like the object permanence hasn't stuck yet.
Yep.
They're just like, well, that's gone. You put something in their closet, they're like, I don't know, do I have that anymore? It's gone. You have to keep the doors open so they can see it and be like, oh, I know I have that. It's there. I can see it. It's in my line of sight.
Constantly fight with our kids not being able to find something. My oldest will stand in the middle of the room and go, "Hey, have you seen it?" And I'm like, "You didn't look for it." He goes, "Yeah, right. I just did. Move anything."
That's what we ask all the time. Have you even looked? And they're like, "Yeah." And I'm like, "You haven't. I know you haven't. You looked around this room. You looked at maybe another room, and you're like, I don't know.
Doesn't
exist. Anyone
exist.
know where my towel is? You know, things like that. We're like, you know, like I don't have any underwear. Do you know where my underwear? Like you have a dresser. Would you look? Go look." I mean, that was, you know, me growing up. I had if I played anything, I had to take it out of the closet and play with it, and then it all had to go back in the closet. So I'm used to opening those doors. They are just like,
same.
Nah. And you know what? Why even bother go in there? There's like we can watch something on the TV. We can screen something. There's YouTube, and we really limit them on the screen time. And yet still, it's like it's just the generation. You know, that's what they're into. So if I can impart some part of physical media, they both have record players, so I have that. So they have their own records.
Nice.
Which is something. And I do get them, you know, Blu-rays and stuff for birthdays, certain big titles.
Yeah.
You know, I got them each one for Christmas. So I don't know if that's we'll see how, if that truly lands, you know, if they might be the one weird person buying physical media, but hey, I got to pass it along. It was instrumental to me as a kid.
Same.
Having a library where you could like pick out movies. And yeah, I watched the same movie like hundreds of times. I can't even tell you the amount of times I saw Escape from New York. I can't even tell. It's not, I don't think there's a number anymore.
Yeah.
So many times we watch this stuff. Which, by the way, we get to talk about Escape from New York quite a bit with people because they actually did a lot of the effects in Corman's studio. His Venice studio called the Lumberyard, called that because it was literally a lumberyard. And he never took down the sign because he didn't want people to know it was a movie studio. So they would still have people come in and ask for trying to buy lumber. And they're making movies. And they did a lot of they outsourced. Jim Cameron actually talked to John Carpenter and outsourced the staff because that's where he was working, starting with Battle Beyond the Stars. So talk about the tendrils that go from the studio. Jim Cameron, a big part of it.
Interesting.
Yeah, I mean, he made the Terminator with a guy who was an editor, who eventually directs the Punisher and Dead Heat for New World. But he brought the editor. Galen Hurd started as a producer at New World. They met at New World when he was, you know, working on Galaxy of Terror and Battle Beyond the Stars, and he eventually takes over art direction. He takes the Skotak brothers who worked on all the effects there. He brings them to Aliens and, you know, Terminator, and he goes to Orion, who co-produced Battle Beyond the Stars with New World Pictures. So like all this stuff is just, you know, the interconnectivity is vast. So
yeah. Well, to interconnect the two big things we talked about, what are your major New World wishes for physical media? I know you got to have a couple that you're like, oh god, the moment this comes out, I'm all over that. And obviously, you're
There,
going to get everything, but
there
the
is a
big ones.
lot. There is a lot. Well, certainly more stuff. The stuff with the '70s stuff is frustrating for all the stuff we've talked about in terms of like finding information about it, and that's they get releases through Shout Factory. So on the Discord, on your Discord, when I see people complain about Shout Factory, I'm like, I get it, but I have to purchase things from them all the time because they release 1,500 copies of Cockfighter, and so which we've talked about on the show. And so that didn't have a physical release forever. So
Right.
like you have to respect that, but they're bare bones all the time.
Yeah.
I buy them though because it's good to have like a good copy of them, and I want to have a copy of them for the future, whatever. And if I'm gonna talk about it on another podcast or something, I always want to have the movies around.
Of course.
But like I have to buy those. I would love them to have any kind of special features. I would love for them to reach out to us. We're doing a podcast about it. My lord, we would love to do something for Shout Factory. We come very cheap. And we will actually fill in some of these gaps because there's just not a lot of stuff on them. So that's the thing that kind of drives me nuts. But for a movie, I think there's going to be a lot of 4Ks of some of the stuff.
I think so too.
Some of the bigger titles I think are going to start getting 4Ks. I don't know if through Shout Factory, but I know that I feel like The Stuff is going to get a 4K. I'm almost certain of that one. That's one we haven't discussed yet. But I'm looking forward to it. I just bought a book about Larry Cohen and been reading all up about him. He did a few movies through different eras on New World Pictures. God Told Me to, Bone, The Stuff. So, I mean, and I bought so many that I haven't even watched. Guaranteed they're going to start getting 4Ks. I mean, that's how it works.
It's
as
so
soon as
depressing.
I track, as soon we did, it's a movie they released on video. We did Zombie Nightmare, which is a terrific movie and so much fun. Not a great movie, everyone, but a fun movie and certainly worth watching. And I tracked down like a foreign, Blu-ray and ordered it from German. It's German. And I'm sure next year 4K from Vinegar Syndrome or Severin or somebody's going to put that out in some top of the line form with all the features that I wish I had gotten, stuff like that. Some of the stuff that they just released, the Reform School Girls one that Vinegar Syndrome put out, that was huge.
Such a good release.
Yeah, but I had already bought the Wicked Vision Media.
Same.
And I bought Ghost Town from Wicked Vision as well, which New World released on video. That was an Empire movie.
Yep.
So all the stuff that I bought like from overseas is going to start popping up.
Of course.
But what is something that New World's put out that I would really love that isn't out yet? There's a lot of them that are getting put out. So it's like I have stacks and stacks behind me of stuff that we haven't even watched yet. So, but there's got to be something that I'm just not thinking of. There's a big title that I'm not thinking of. It'll come to me. But there's a lot of stuff out there. But we were coming up with a list. In fact, we were going to do an episode on the physical media wishes of New World, and that was around the time that Cockfighter wasn't on disc. So then a bunch of titles did get announced. Yeah. So I was like, okay, so we kind of put that to the side, and we didn't end up doing that. But we might do something like that next year, just to try to maybe put it up on our YouTube channel and kind of talk about the different releases that aren't out yet.
Your brother's into physical media too. Does he collect as much as you, or is he a little bit lighter? Because I know
lighter.
You're all over it, so I assumed it was lighter.
Yeah. He has had to like get tricky with like birthday presents and stuff because he's like, you buy too much, so I don't know what. He's like, I just assume you have it, and so I don't know if you do or don't. But he gave me like a series of DVDs and Blu-rays of Tobe Hooper's later career.
Nice.
Because that's the stuff that you don't get tons of.
Yep.
You have all of the, Life Force and, Texas Chainsaw Massacres and all that stuff. But what about his later stuff? What about Jin? Or what about, spontaneous combustion? So he gave me a bunch of those. So that's what he has to do to try to like find a way, because I buy way too much. But he's also into it. He also subscribes to Vinegar Syndrome, and then I get him a bunch of silly stuff whenever it's a holiday and stuff. So I did the same thing to him, but I did a deep dive on Richard Grieco stuff, and because he's been talking all year about oh God, the Richard Grieco movie that Fred Decker did. It's escaping me all of a sudden.
I don't have the Wikipedia up at the moment. My mind is fried.
Yeah. Oh, really?
I'm wrecked from working on the newest issue of the zine for the last 2.5 days in a row.
Dude. I
can hardly remember anything right now.
Yeah, and it's the morning for me, so I'm still like on my first cup of coffee, so my brain's not quite working right yet. But yeah, he was really into. Oh no, that's not it. I'm trying to think of the title. It'll come to me. But he got into that, and we talked about it a bunch, and then we got together in the fall, and we watched it together, and so I went deep on all the like 2000s, 90s Richard Grieco movies, and that's what I gave him for Christmas, and made him laugh a lot. So I'm excited to get his. I have to go through all the Tobe Hoopers and give him my report. And he's gonna have to go through all the Richard Griecos and So yeah, we get into physical media a good amount, and of course we're always talking about Vinegar Syndrome stuff because we both subscribe.
Right.
We're on a fence about next year, but I think we might. The price point is looking not bad.
I mean, it's better than people expected, especially when they're.
I was thinking
at $1,000.
I was thinking of a big increase, especially the way they ended the year.
Right.
With like. What, 3 box sets or 2 box sets and like that Existence and just I mean, geez, like they went, so I was like, oh, next year is going to be expensive to help pay for all that stuff.
Yeah.
But no, as it turns out.
I think the title is If Looks Could Kill.
Yes. Oh my God. I know it was like looks. I couldn't help but think Never Too Young to Die, which is not him, but a guy who directed a movie for New World, Gil Bettman, who we've tried to have on the podcast, and he was like, no. Because I'm sure people are asking him all the time to talk about Never Too Young. He did a movie called Crystal Heart, which we absolutely love. And it's a boy in the bubble, like, love story. It's unbelievable. You have to see it. You have to see it to believe it, especially the love scene. And I'll leave it there. But we like unabashedly love this movie. It was like something we just kind of threw on for a February, Valentine's Day movie, and we all were like, "This is the most amazing thing I've ever seen." And then he did Never Too Young to Die, so we talked about that. And then he also just did, his last movie was called Night Vision, which is a Fred Williamson and Cynthia Rothrock, Robert Forster movie.
Nice.
From the late 90s, which again probably needs a Blu-ray pretty badly, but not a New World movie. And I watched that recently, so I have him on the brain, so that's why I couldn't think of Looks Could Kill. But yeah, that's the Fred Decker movie that he just talked about all the time. So I was like, okay, you're going to talk about Richard Grieco, I'm going to give you all the Richard Griecos. So
well, and Grieco did a lot around then, so it's real easy to get confused.
A ton. Oh my God. And again, I just seen that movie Against the Law too, which is a Wynorski movie. So I'm trying to somewhat get in on all the movies I gave him. So yeah, he did a ton of movies, so many. I barely scratched the surface. And I gave him like 10.
We have said Wynorski enough times. Now Mr. Will Dodson is watching this, and he probably just collapsed out of pure euphoria because he loves Wynorski so much.
He is he's a perfect, Corman guy.
Yep.
Because he's to this day, even though he makes all these like doggone movies and stuff, he just knows how. And he's roped in, like Tony Randall directed one of those because they did a series of them. And he knows how to make exploitation films, and his movies are fun.
Yep. He
doesn't think too much. He just has a good time. Like, he made the best Deathstalker, Deathstalker's, he's the worst guy in the world, and he's in a terrible wig, and you have to root for him. It's awful. But Deathstalker 2 is super fun. It's everything you thought the first one might be. And then 3 and 4 also exist. I watched them all. I watched them all for a Deathstalker episode, but the
Well,
second one is a blast. So.
and this is another one that's stuck on a Shout Factory exclusive Blu-ray that's a double feature, but you can't find them anymore because I think back then it was only limited to 1,000, and they were cheaper then, so a lot of people bought them up fairly quickly, and now they're long gone, and they'll probably never re-release them on Blue.
That's the problem with the Shout Factory stuff too. They keep the releases like 1,000, 1,500 that I have to buy them. I can't wait for a sale because Shout Factory sells out, and they're they're a big label, and people buy stuff. So you kind of can't wait on it. I have a DVD of it. I think of the Sword and Sorcery collection from Roger Corman.
Nice.
So that has Deathstalker 2 and Barbarian Queen and Warrior and the Sorceress, which was made for New World at the very tail end of after Corman had sold. So that's how I have it. But to get the Blu-ray, like this is tons of like the DVDs of the Roger Corman stuff. This is all like Shout Factory's Corman era stuff.
Which they did a ton of those DVDs.
A ton. And some of those DVDs are still around. And that's what you may have to buy if you want to get some of these things, if you want to get some of the commentaries and all that stuff. But which they do have. Some of them don't, but some of them do.
The sad thing is they'll probably release them on Blu-ray, but with how infrequently they do those, it'll probably be 2027 until the one that you're after comes out on Blu-ray. And by then it'll be $44 and limited to like 19 copies or something.
Oh, and like a poster you don't need, and like
and when it comes in, you'll have to pay the postage because they send it media mail. And
oh my god, the amount of posters I have in the closet of Shout Factory stuff, and I'm like, I don't even have walls. Even if I wanted to put this up, I don't have the wall space for it. I don't want the poster of the new art. No offense to anybody, but if I want it, I want the original poster because that's what I have memories of, not the like new Event Horizon poster. I mean, it's nice art, but I don't have any. Yeah, I don't have any history with that. So
that's why I bought those poster portfolios. That way, I at least have a reason to get them sometimes.
Oh, I just thought of one of the movies I was thinking of. We're going to probably talk about this movie next year, and that's Grand Theft Auto. Because I have the DVD of that, probably up here, and we're going to talk about it, or Eat My Dust, pardon me, but also Grand Theft Auto 2. But I have the DVD of Eat My Dust, but that's one that actually doesn't. I'm sure there is an old Blu-ray of it, and I need to probably find it. But that's one that I'm like, why aren't they releasing that? Right. And will that be a 4K coming out? Probably. Sometimes at this point, I'm trying to hold off and see if there's a 4K that comes out before I settle and buy on some of the movies I want to get. Because every time I buy a movie, then the next thing you do is they put out a 4K. And Shout Factory is the worst at that.
Not to make this a bigger deal for you to maybe spend money today, but the Great Texas Dynamite Chase and Eat My Dust came out as a Shout Factory exclusive February of 2023. It's a fairly recent one.
Yeah, that is. And I do have a Texas Dynamite Chase on DVD here, and I have Grand Theft Auto, but yeah. They also released like a trio, I think, of like the final what's the movie? What's it called? They released like Stacy is one. That's like the first movie from Andy Sedaris. No, Stacy it's either a Sedaris or a Cirio Santiago. But they released like 3 movies on one disc. And I've almost bought it during a sale. It hasn't gotten to a point where they're almost going to sell out on it. I'm checking the numbers on it all the time. Because I'm like, they're, again, movies that are very hard to find streaming. If they do stream, they only stream occasionally on Shout TV. Because they have the rights to it. And then they, to find these things on DVD are like so expensive to just it's ridiculous. The 70s stuff is the hardest. Because I would love to have some really good versions of those movies to watch. But I understand from their point of view how many people are looking to go deep on the Nurses movies. Though that's another one. The Nurses I don't think they put out the first Nurses movie on Blu-ray. I have a DVD of like the other 4.
Right.
The very first one, the Stephanie Rothman one, they don't have out. So that's not released. They re-released 2 of their biker films. I don't think they've released... they haven't released one of them. I think it might be Angels Die Hard. I think it's the first one. And they didn't release. They released Bury Me an Angel and they released Angels Hard as They Come, I think.
Yeah, those are the two. Yeah.
So they released those two, and I own those two. Because we've watched those. That was one of our early episodes where we talked about all three Bikers films. It's one that will never see the light of day, but it was a test episode that we did to start the podcast. It is not good, but got us going, and we realized we can't do 3 movies in one episode. It's just too much. But
That's a lot. Yeah.
It's a lot, especially if you want to try and get into the history of all of them, and it's just too much. But that's one, like the first 2 movies that the New World put out, that would be nice to get out. And I'm sure they will put them out eventually, but they're probably going to be just the movie on a Blu-ray for $34. And you're like,
plus shipping.
Well, not if you meet, but then you have to add more things to your cart to meet that free shipping.
Of course, that's how
I
they
probably
get you.
have way too much here simply because I've added things to the cart to be like, well, if it's free, if I added another $15, it's free shipping. I should just get something. Otherwise,
Yeah.
I look at it like that shipping cost is another movie. So why not?
I've probably spent at Orbit like $200 extra in the last year. Just I want these 2 titles, but 3 gets me free shipping. And why would I not add the 3rd?
Right.
And just spend an extra $17 to save $7.
And on Diabolic, if I order something and I know I'm going to get charged $5 no matter what, but then I'm like,
pile it on.
But let's make it count.
Yep.
Right. I can't just order 1 or 2 things because that's like I still going to get charged for shipping. So I got to make it count. I was looking through TerraVision last night and I was like, okay, there's no way around this shipping charge, so I really got to make this one. I'm just piling things in the cart, just trying to what T-shirts do I want? Like, it's just, it's, it's. I'm glad we're all the same on that. I'm glad I'm not alone.
They have duped us into spending so much extra money. I agree.
Yeah. For it's the $7 shipping charge, people
right.
And I think about people in Canada that have to spend double that at least just to get their Vinegar Syndrome subscriptions or something. I
think they get Canada's $100 extra and international's $170.
Yeah, I mean, to get free shipping. Imagine,
right.
Imagine if you're living in Belgium and you're like, oh shit, I gotta pile $200 worth of stuff just to get free shit.
Here we go.
But yeah, I'm sure they're like, whoa, you're complaining about a $7 charge, my lord.
Yep.
And it does cost money. It costs money to ship. Postage is not cheap anymore.
Vinegar Syndrome is losing a lot of money on that shipping internationally. I guarantee it.
Yeah. Well, they are now starting. Didn't they say something about adding a shipping charge, or they're adding? No, I was looking at the you could have a shipping option for the subscription. That's what I was looking at. But yeah. That's another reason also to get the subscription. It's like I'm trying to think do I want to do it another year? But it's like you get free shipping,
forever.
You get you get the Black Friday sale all year long for any of the other titles that you want to get, and you get those prices, and you get it for free shipping because you're a subscriber. It's like, damn it, they really, they kind of, those are all the things that I'm always thinking about whenever I buy stuff. So they know what they're doing. They're smart
really
people over there.
Well, Ryan, I will give you your weekend back. This has been too fun, exactly how I knew it was going to be. I love talking with you, and we got to have you back on eventually. Maybe we can,
I would love that.
Maybe we can pick out a couple New World and just have you teach me some stuff, because I would love to dive in on some of these.
No problem, man. Love to do that. And if you have me, if you need somebody for Reconnected, I'd be happy to jump on there too. So.
The moment I hit end recording, we are scheduling that. So thank you for doing this.
Thank you for having me, Ryan. This is great.
And
big
again, for everybody.
So.
Oh, come on. I'm going to interrupt the compliment to say everybody needs to go be a big fan of this, Ryan. If you've not subscribed to the podcast, like I said in the beginning, you're messing up. This is top tier, one of the best out there, super great research, very fun personalities. And it's one of those perfect, what's the best way to say this? I think I mentioned this once before, but I had somebody define in the last year that if we use paintings to decorate our space, things like media is the way that we can decorate our time. And the best thing I can say about this podcast is my time is greatly decorated when I'm listening to you.
Thanks, man. Yeah, that's what we're hoping for. We really want to make sure that's when I talked to you about our editing off mic, like we work to make sure these episodes are packed full of fun, information. We want it to be worth your time. If you are taking the time out to listen to us, even in 1.5 speed, we still want to make this worth your time. You know, we want to make it worth it for you to listen. And we don't take it lightly that people do listen to us. We don't take it lightly. Like there's millions of podcasts out there. Yep. So many to choose from. And
literally millions.
Literally. And if you're listening to us, like that means the world to us. And you know, we didn't think we'd start this podcast about New World Pictures and to have as many people follow us as they do. We're so thrilled for everybody to take this ride with us, because it's like we probably would keep doing it even if we didn't have people listen, but people are listening, and it's awesome. So, but we don't take that for granted, and we don't take that lightly. So we don't want to like just throw out anything. We want to make sure we curate and edit and put out the best material we can for people. So if that's working, then that's awesome to hear. That's a huge boost for us.
Job well done, and everybody go give your time to them, because it is well deserved. And we'll see you on the next one.
Thank you. Thanks, Chad. Appreciate it.
God damn it. Thank you for listening to the Disconnected Podcast. There's one big thing that you could do to help the show, and that is to leave a rating and review on the podcast service of your choice. Thank you.
If you're looking for more horror outside of the mainstream, look no further than Unsung Horrors, a podcast about underseen horror movies. I'm Lance.
And I'm Erica. Every other week, we'll cover a horror movie with fewer than 1,000 views on Letterboxd. We'll even give you double feature recommendations to pair with the movies we discuss.
From gothic to shot on video, from slashers to comedies, from giallo to J-horror. We'll cover all the subgenres. So join us as we unearth these hidden gems of horror.
Follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, all at Unsung Horrors, available wherever you listen to podcasts. And part of the Someone's Favorite Productions podcast network.